I had this realization a few weeks ago. I was like, when we don't believe what God says about us, we are not pleasing Him at all. Because Scripture says, without faith, it's impossible to please God. So if you believe Him for all the things that He could do, why don't you believe what He says about you? How can I say I'm in a relationship with Him if Scripture says if two, how can two walk together unless they agree? If I can't even agree on what He says about me, what are we doing? And why don't I agree with Him when He's the one that created me? Why would I believe anything anybody else had to say? So a lot of people, they struggling with, well, this person said this, but God said this. They're like literally unstable in all their ways because they're double-minded.
Hi, and welcome to another episode in another season of the One Witness podcast on the Woman Witness TV network. I'm your host, Leah Fortier. And as you know, here on this platform, we bring to you voices of women that are out there making a positive impact in their lives, in their families, and in the community around them. Women of resilience, women of faith, women who have battled through something and they are bold enough, strong enough to come back to the well and share their stories and pull others to stir through. So today we are speaking with healing coach and CEO of the Enamor Effect, Briana Brown. Now, Briana is here to guide us on a journey of breaking free from trauma and rediscovering your God-given identity and stepping boldly into the life in which you were created to live. I couldn't be more excited to jump into this topic. This topic is a topic that sits at the heart of many women. The topic of identity. Who are we? What's next in our lives? What does God have planned for us? What's behind door number one? So I brought Briana Brown here to talk just about that and to talk to us about some of the triggers that trauma can bring when we step into this new identity or this new season of ourselves. So, without further ado, without me talking way too much, I'm going to bring in my guest today, Briana Brown. Hey, Briana, welcome to the well. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I am amazing, and I am so happy to have you here to talk about this sensitive yet intriguing topic of identity. And of course, we all are aware right now it's troubling times, right now is a different season, and we don't know where to turn, we don't know where God is leading us, and some of us may have a little bit of baggage, a little bit of trauma that we're carrying around with us, and how we understand that these traumas can play a big role into discovering who our true identity is. So I'm excited to have you on here to talk to us a little bit about identity. Talk to us about what inspired you to create the Enamor Effect. Tell us a little bit
Ooh.
about it, and what does a name signify to you?
So the name, well, God gave me the name first. This was during the pandemic,
Yeah.
around Valentine's Day of 2020, and I was kind of having I won't call it a midlife crisis because I'm only 32 right now. So I was 28 at the time. I was going through a lot of things. I just had a really bad breakup. And I was kind of, to be honest with you, I was kind of banking on that being the person I was going to marry because I was like, I'm getting older. I want to have kids. I want to get married. I want to do all the things that I'm supposed to do by now because my parents were 24 and then got married, and I'm 28 and I don't
Mm,
have any kids. I'm not married. And I heard God say to me, the Enamor Effect. And I was like, okay.
mm,
So I wrote it down.
mm,
And I got my bachelor's in psychology, and I was planning to be a therapist. That was
mm.
originally my life plan. And then when I went off to grad school at FAMU, I got sick and I had PCOS. So my body went through like a whole pregnancy, but there was no baby. I had to come back to Augusta, and I went through, like, this really, really dark depression, and then I went back to Tallahassee. Um, God told me to move back to Tallahassee in 2019, so I did. And then, while I was there, that I had a really bad breakup with this person, and what like, I was just like, "Okay, I don't know what that means." And he took me back to my psychology books 'cause I got my bachelor's in psychology, and I went back and I was looking, I'm like, "Oh, this can be applied to real life, not just like a therapy session. This is like if people don't have certain needs, this is where their relationships stop." So, like, for, like, example, like, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, while it is outdated, like, one of the most basic needs is, like, safety, food, and security, right? And now, like, some people, that's all they want from their relationships. They don't want anything more than that because of things that they've been through. If they don't have that for themselves either or from, whoever, they're not gonna want anything more than that. And
Mm,
so he started taking me through, like, all these different theories that I studied and I learned for the sake of my degree that I was not using at the time.
mm,
And I was like, "Okay, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this." So then maybe 2022,
mhm.
he started telling me what the Enamor Effect meant. The Enamor Effect is literally a six-step program that I have that takes women from being in love with their trauma, and when I say that, I mean, like,
Yeah,
being stuck in this personality or this shell that your trauma has created
correct.
instead of being the person you were called to be. So it
Mhm,
takes them through all of that, takes
mm.
them through these 6 steps just to get them to where they're supposed to be. It's not I'm not saying that I'm not playing God at all, but to get you in your rarest form where you don't have any kind of trauma determining what you're gonna do or what you're gonna be or how you're gonna behave, any of that, without any of those factors at your rarest form where you're supposed to be.
I love that. Wow, you said so much right there. I'm sorry if I'm. Can I just highlight or ask some questions about it? You said that you were in this situation where you had to figure out what God was telling you. He began to show you exactly what the Enamor Effect is. And I'm sorry, you said something where you said that sometimes we are in love with our trauma because we enjoy the world that it created. Now, I'm not going to say enjoy. I don't know if I want to say enjoy. I want to say, and you didn't say these words, so I'm kind of hearing and saying what I think, but I do understand being in a state of trauma and being comfortable in it. It's our
Absolutely.
identity. It's who we kind of created
Mhm.
ourselves to be, right? I mean, I can only talk about myself. I mean, for a long time, I felt like I just had like this. I was mad at the world. I was mad at the world. And I was just kind of mad, and I kind of liked being able to be mad because I had like this, awful childhood and I can always just bring it up and be like, well, this is why I'm mad. But when God told me to let that go, I had to kind of recreate myself, if you will,
Mhm.
redefine my identity.
Yeah.
Okay. I see what you're saying. I'm going to ask you about these 6 steps in a minute, but I don't want to get ahead of myself.
I think you're
Okay.
right, it's fine.
Thank you for sharing your personal story. And I'm sorry, about you getting sick and, but God sent you back. He sent you to, pick up where kind of you left off. So I
Listen,
want to talk
that's a whole situation.
it, girl,
That is yeah.
it sounds like a lot, but I want you to tell me, what does it mean to you when you align your purpose, and how has that shaped your own personal journey through going back to school, seeing how God has like aligned your steps, everything that you have been through from your degree to what you're doing now. How does that define your journey in creating your purpose?
Honestly, it wasn't my degree that did it for me, um, because growing up in the South, I've been in the South most of my life, um, with the exception of 5 years. 2 of those years I was in Panama. I was born in Panama. My parents are military, and we lived in Germany for 3 years. So those are the only times I was not in either Georgia or Florida. I've always lived in either Georgia or Florida. Growing up as a dark-skinned woman in Georgia is
Mm,
like, and especially because I have a lighter skinned sister. My sister is very, very light. So,
mm.
like you saw my son earlier, my sister is a little bit lighter than my son.
Oh wow.
So
Okay.
we have my parents are my complexion. So
Mm,
it was always, very different for me, especially
Mhm.
growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s, where everybody had to be the long hair, thick red bone. That's not me.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's not me.
Mhm.
So, I got to a place where I didn't feel good enough as a child. I wasn't affirmed because my parents are, like I said, my parents are military. My parents, both my parents come from broken homes as well.
Mm.
So my dad didn't have a dad, and he didn't really know how to be a father because he didn't have that. My mom comes from a long line of people who just didn't say I love you. So
Mm.
I didn't hear I love you. I wasn't affirmed as a child. I didn't All I knew is that I was smart.
Mm.
When it came to everything else, I didn't get that. So all my dad, but like I said, with my dad, he didn't have a dad, and all he knew from what growing up was my mom didn't have enough for me and my siblings, and it was six of them. He would send $25 for six of them, and and even when I got pregnant with my son, that was something that kept coming up. Like, you need to make sure you do right because my dad only sent $25 for six of us, and I'm like, okay, Daddy, that was your story. That I understand, but that was kind of where the falling in love with trauma kind of I saw that I was like, ah, okay, that's what that means. But being able, like, when I was about 24, 25, I was able to, like, I had already, I was, no, I hadn't got my master's yet. I got my master's in public administration when I came home in 2016. I graduated in 2018. So as soon as I got here, basically I started school and just kind of fill up time because I was going through a really, really deep depression being back in Augusta. But I started looking at my family. I'm like, all of y'all check these boxes for this kind of thing that's happened. All of y'all, you have these things. Everybody has been sexually assaulted. Everybody has gone through some kind of thing that happened that completely
Yeah.
changed their life. Like, I have an uncle that's been on drugs since he was 15 years old. He's now 64.
Mm.
I've never seen my uncle sober ever in my life. But it
Mm.
was one thing that, like, just took him over the edge. And I learned that talking to his siblings, talking to my mom, and
Mm.
just why. And I'm like, okay, so what is that? I always wanted to know why are people the way they are. That was what inspired me to get my degree in psychology.
Got it. Got it.
Now I'm here and I'm like, even as working as an admin, I like, while I'm there to do just the minimal things, I see the bigger issues. Like that's always everything has always came back to that for me. So even with the move to Tallahassee and moving back to Augusta and then moving back to Tallahassee, it was like God was just, everything that you've done at this point in your life is going to come to this point where you are right now. So that's where I am. So it just, from even with ministry. So, like, I grew up in the South, like I said, but church was not as important to my parents as it is to me now. Like, we went to church, but like our involvement, it was not like how I'm involved now.
It was a
Or,
box that you
yeah, it was just like, okay, we went to church, check, all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But even then, the where we were going, it was so, I
Come
don't
on.
want to say it was wrong,
Yeah.
but it was so unorthodox
Mm.
and
Mm.
so manipulative of God's word that it was kind of like, I remember asking questions and they couldn't answer me. I remember getting in trouble for asking questions because I've always been I've always been the one that asks questions when I don't understand, and it might come off as me being being a smart aleck or whatever, but I just wanted to know. So, like, I remember our youth pastor telling me that I wasn't capable of loving anybody at 17. At this point, I had already had a huge heartbreak, my first really, really big heartbreak. And he was like, "You're not even capable of loving anybody at 17." And I was like, "Didn't you marry your wife when you were 18?" And he was like, "Yes." And I was like, "So did you not love her when you were 17?" And he was like, "We're not talking about me." I was like, "But we are, though. Like, we are, because we're both, I mean, you were 17 at the time, I'm 17 now. What is it about my age that determines whether or not I'm able to love somebody?"
Mm.
He went to my dad, and my dad was like, "Well, did you answer the question?" And he was like, "No, because that's not her business." It's like, so why was it your business to tell
To
her?
tell her that.
and I went to a lot of people to a church with a lot of people that didn't look like me, if you know what I mean. Um,
Yeah.
it was a
Mm,
very mixed congregation, so my
yeah.
dad felt like it was very racist
Yeah.
or like
Mm,
very racially charged for his
mhm.
response was.
Mhm.
And so it was a whole thing. But
Mm.
so just growing up in those kind of environments and then wanting to know why, like that, it kind of just like came together for me.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing that because I think you really touched on what a lot of people are even going through to this day, especially women, you know, and kind of losing or trying to find yourself. Where do I fit in all of this? And I think you do probably what a lot of us wish that we could have done, or maybe a lot of us sit in fear of, and simply asking questions, and I'm kind of getting outside of where I want to go right now, but when did you get to the point where you were, instead of asking other people to identify who you are, when did you get to the point where you decided to ask God, who am I?
Honestly, I still go through that now. Like I've been on this journey for 8 years. I can
Okay.
it's 2025. So 20 yeah, 8 years. This will be 8 years.
Yeah.
So me and my son's father at the time, we had a really big disagreement about something, and I was just like, I remember being 24 and was like, okay, this can't keep happening. Like my perspective of men had to change because growing up the way that I did, I didn't think I was attractive to anybody. So anybody that found me attractive, I like clung to them. Like it was that like anybody that told me they loved me, anybody told me that I was pretty, anybody that like affirmed me where I had not been affirmed. Because one thing you weren't gonna tell me that I wasn't smart. I knew that I was smart. But everything else, like with my physical being, like I was like, I need if somebody tells me this, and I'm going to do whatever I can to protect them.
Mm,
So,
I see.
um, getting to that place when I finally got to a place where we had stopped communicating for a moment, I was like, God, this can't keep happening. And he was like, it's not everybody else, it's you. It's you. And I was like, "Okay, but what does that mean?" Like, and I'm like, "What about me?" I go to church. At this time, I had stopped going to the kind of church that I was grew up in and went to a completely different church that I
Mm,
still go to now. And I remember right after that happened, my now bishop, he was my pastor at the time, but he's a bishop now. He kept praying for my self-esteem. I'm like, "Why are you praying for my self-esteem?" Like, I was so mad. I was like, why do you keep praying for my self-esteem? I don't understand why you keep praying for that. Like,
yeah.
and he was like, you'll see it. And I was, and sure enough, I saw it. And he started showing me me. So even when I go through different situations, so like that situation happened, he started showing me how I allowed every relationship that I had ever been into that point, from the time I was like 15 years old up until 24, how I allowed each and every one of those relationships to define me in some way because I didn't know who I was before then. So I was like, okay, so who am I? And he's like, and it took me back to a paper that I wrote when I was at FAMU, because I didn't finish at FAMU. I finished in Augusta. I got, like I said, I got my master's in public administration here, but I was going for my master's in social work at FAMU. And Dr. Langley, he had us write a paper on our paradigm. He said how, and basically it was like, how did you become to think the way that you are now? Like,
Mm,
your way of thinking. And I remember I wrote out this paper, and he like after I turned in, I got 100 on the paper
yeah.
because I was able to see things for what they were. But I also knew that I use it as a crutch for me. Like, I'm this way because this happened and this happened and this happened. I come from these kind of people.
Yeah.
He was like, "Have you ever seen a therapist?" And I was like, "Yes." That's why I want to be a therapist because I've been like, I
Right.
always had this chip on my shoulder, and it was like even now, God is still like, you have to be delivered from that spirit of offense because I used to get so worked up about stuff when people would question me. Because it was like 'cause I wouldn't question myself. It was because I didn't know myself to question myself. And he's just, like, slowly showing me things. It's like, "But, you don't have to be like that. You don't have to do that. You don't have to be so blocked off from people. You don't have to, because all of this stuff comes from being a military child, being in a place where people are in and out of my life all the time. So I'm looking at people like, "No, no, I don't, nope." don't want no attachment. So, like, I've been in my church for this will be 9 years this year.
Wow.
And I even now, I'm like, I don't have any, like, attachment to anybody there because that's just like, up until recently, I didn't understand why I wasn't able to connect with people. And it's because I just don't I've blocked myself off to the point that it's hard for me to connect with anybody. Like, I don't have a best friend. I don't have a lot of friends around me. A lot of my friends are from college. I don't have, like, new friends, like,
Mhm.
it's not I don't it's hard it's been hard for me to do that. So,
Yeah.
like, working through that, I'm like, "Oh, okay." Like, he's showing me different things, like, "Brianna, this you can see it in everybody else, but I need you to see this in you too." So,
Mm.
he took me through my process first and still taking me. When things happen, still taking me.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. You said so many things. I just want to highlight one that you said when your pastor, now bishop, who's always praying that what is that you see yourself, right? It does. It brought me back to a point where people used to always pray for me and say, "I can't wait to use." What did they say? Can't wait till you know who you are, find out who you are. I can relate to that moment of feeling like, "What you talking about? I know who I am, right?" I mean, I feel like we all have been there. I may not know what my purpose is, but I know who I am, right? And I think man, I used to get so offended when people would say that to me. I want you to talk to some people right now who've heard that time and time again. I can't wait till you know who you are, right? Talk to some people in about that right now. How does this really particularly connect to our trauma, and how does this manifest for women of faith?
Well, I'll tell you, the first thing that I had to do, which is the first step of my program, is evaluate how I see myself. Because that is part of the problem. A lot of us see us like I see myself well, not see myself. I saw myself as ugly. I saw myself as not attractive. I saw myself as not worthy. I saw myself as just a resource for people
Mm.
because
What can I do for them?
yeah, that's literally because and honestly, what people fail to realize sometimes, you're gonna attract whatever you have going on that people can see that. Even if you can't see that, they see that. So, like, people that would I would be involved with romantically, especially, it would be like a whole bunch of love bombing, like a whole bunch of, "Oh my god, you're so beautiful. I love you and I wanna do everything for you. I want you to be my wife." All the things that I wanted to hear,
Yeah.
but then all the things that I also did not need in my life
Huh.
at that time. So, like, domestic violence and abuse and
Mm.
mental abuse, spiritual abuse, people telling me I was going to hell because I wasn't taking them to church with me, like,
Mm.
I wasn't in a relationship with. But because they told me that they love me, I was still staying there. And I had to look and say, "Okay, why do you allow that? Why do you think this about yourself? What are the recurring cycles in your life? Why do you think those things are recurring?" That was the big thing for me. So even the going back to understanding that a lot of that came from because I wasn't affirmed as a child. I had to
Mm.
go back, and the next step in my program is neutralizing the pain. And I said,
Mm.
"Okay, why do I feel like my parents didn't affirm me? Because they didn't, but they were only doing the best that they knew how to do." And that really took the sting out of all of it because it was like they didn't tell me they loved me. They didn't tell me I was pretty. They weren't they like even now with my son, I have a 3-year-old son, and he is very, very, very affectionate. And I am just not that I'm starting to get that way now, but we grew up in a household where we just were not affectionate. So when people wanted to show me affection, I clung to that too. And so just understanding my parents literally were doing what they had never seen anybody do.
Yeah.
They were doing the best that they could. Like,
They
I'm the
were
first
giving you
one.
what they had. They can't give you what they don't have.
Yeah,
I understand. Yeah. I understand
and
that.
I'm the firstborn, so there's a lot of things that they just didn't know with me.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of and I remember telling my son's dad this. I was 24, and my dad told me, he said, "We know we made a lot of mistakes with you, so we tried to fix it with your sister." And I remember, like, "I'm still here, you can fix it with me," but I understand how, like, they just didn't at the time that I needed certain resources, they didn't have them. They just didn't have them. When me and my sister are 4 years apart. So around the time that I was going off to high school, which technically I was still in the same school because my school was from 6th to 12th grade. Um, the time that I was starting high school, my sister, she was 5 years behind me in school, so she was, like, in, like, 4th grade, but my parents are retired, so life changed drastically. Now, granted, they did own the house that we were living in, but, like, as far as who they knew, what they were doing career-wise, my dad was a teacher when I was in high school, and my mom was working at YDC, so the resources they had were very and YDC is the youth detention center here. Um, they're very, very limited. So by the time my sister graduated, they were back working. They're working for the federal government now. So their resources look a little bit different. Like they started, my sister was still in high school when they started working for the government again. So
Mm,
it just looked very, very different. And while I took it so personally at that moment, 'cause it's like you can still
mm.
help me, but I got to a place where it's like I don't know if you're a firstborn child, but a lot of us are
Yeah.
like
Oh, yeah, girl.
that hyper independence thing is
Yeah, it's a thing. It
it
is
is.
totally a
And I
thing.
had to like
Yeah,
because a lot of that came from hurt from me.
yeah.
I speak for everybody, but that was what it was for me. So a lot of the time, I had to
Mm,
go back and look at what the source of the pain was and take it in context and not out of context. So a lot of times we only look at it from our point of view.
correct.
If you look at them from theirs, they're like, okay, well, I gave you this, I gave you that. I didn't ask you to do that. You're supposed in my mind, I'm like, I didn't ask you to provide for me. You're supposed to do that. You're a parent.
Yeah.
But not everybody sees parenting that way.
That's good. Oh, yeah, and I want to tell you, absolutely. I think, especially us as oldest, and I try not to put this on my child as well. And I know you have one right now, and but I do. I'm not gonna lie. That whole complex of watch your sister, watch your brother. Make sure they're good and make sure they're that. And at times you're like, wait a minute. You know, what y'all doing? I'm doing all this work, and yeah, no, I can tell. I can totally agree and see the difference between that first child. And what they were able to do and give versus that second one, and you're just like, wait a minute, you got a lot more energy, you're more present.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely
Okay.
that part.
I
Yeah.
feel like I done did all the raising and stuff and
You
watching.
know,
uh
and then, when as you get older too, you see things differently. Because a lot of I mean, honestly, a lot of us, our trauma goes back to our parents. It
yeah.
literally is some of it's generational curses, some of it's just cycles or, things of that
Mhm.
nature. But I think with me, I realized how much of a problem child I could have been. I'm not gonna say that I was definitely a problem child. I just
Mhm.
because I didn't always get caught. But, I'm like you really be mad at your parents when you was out here well, like, you was wilding out here, like, I remember my mom seeing my there was a party that I went to, and it got really out of hand, somebody got shot, it
Oh my god.
was a whole thing, my car was on the news,
Oh
and
no.
I was leaving the party, and my car went by like, you can because at the time, my windows weren't as tinted as they were, later on, but you could see my car, and my car was very distinct, like and my mom was like, "Didn't you tell me you was going to?" I was like, "No, no, mm-mm, mm-mm, was not there. I don't know what you're talking about, mom." And I'm like, "Girl, all these times that you could have died and your parents would not have known nothing, and you wanna complain about them not doing what you needed them to do. You weren't doing what they needed you to do." Like,
Mm, come
messed
on
up
now, that goes
there,
deep.
but
Seeing God's hand and everything.
mhm.
I want to ask you something. What are some of the common lies and false beliefs that trauma plants in our minds, and how can women recognize them?
Um, I think a lot of them come from, a lot of them are around self-worth. Because and about your identity or like you're not gonna be anything or you're gonna be just like your mama or you're gonna be just like your dad 'cause that is I hate when people say that. I genuinely do. A lot of that has to do with self-worth. And I say that because if you can convince somebody that they're not worth something, then you can change their identity. You can
100%.
change who they think they are.
And
And
what
if
they
you
expect.
yep, and then I had this realization a few weeks ago, and I was like, when we don't believe what God says about us, we are not pleasing him at all. Because the scripture says without faith it's impossible to please God. So if you believe him for all the things that he could do, why don't you believe what he says about you? And so it's like, okay, God, okay, what does that mean? So it's like, if I told you that you were chosen, if I told you you were a royal priesthood, if I told you that you are my masterpiece, you're my handiwork, why don't you believe that? When God really started talking to me about identity, well, one, he talks to me all the time, and God talked to me different. That's the first thing first. God, he sometimes he be talking to people like talking, and he does that to me sometimes, but a lot of times he talks to me through songs,
Mm.
and specifically 90s R&B because I'm a 90s baby. But I'll hear a song and I'm like, oh my God, like
Yes.
God.
Yes.
But there's a song, it's not a 90s song, but Fantasia has a song called In Deep, and is like she's talking about how she knows her husband has all these felonies and he's this that and he's done all these things before he married her. And God was like, every time you don't believe what you say about me, you are not I you're not pleasing me. And I'm like, how? Like, I do what you asked me to. I did. Like, you asked me to write the book, I did. You asked me to start the class, I did. You told me to go to this place, I did. Why is that not pleasing to you? Because apparently I believed you enough to do what you asked me to do. Like, and that
Mm.
I
Right.
talk, I get real raw with God. Like, I do. I talk to him just like I talk to anybody else. Like, because I need to know, I need to understand, I need you to make it plain. Like,
Right.
don't
Right.
talk big words to me, please.
Right. I'm not mad. Mm-mm.
But yeah, I'm very just raw with him. That's just how I am. And he started
Right.
telling me, he's like, if you believe that I will do all these things, like you believe that I will heal your body from PCOS, and I did, and then you believe that you believe that I will give you a child, and I did. I took you back to the same place where they told you couldn't have kids, and they had to tell you that you were pregnant. So why couldn't you
Mm.
believe what I said about you? And as far as your identity goes, I told you you were chosen. I told you you were a royal priesthood. I told you you were my handiwork. I told you that you were anointed by me. That you were, you did all that. I did all these things. I know the number of hairs on your head. Like, why don't you believe what I said about you? Why
Mm.
don't why? Why don't you believe that? No.
Mm.
Oh,
Mm.
okay, God. You ain't gotta hit me in the chest, but I
Mm.
realize that people they believe so much of what he's gonna do, but they don't believe what he says. They don't believe action because a lot of people they don't believe what people are saying. They don't believe what people are doing. God's not people. And so with even with that, it was like, how can I say I'm in a relationship with him if scripture says if two how can two walk together unless they agree? If I can't even agree on what he says about me, what are we doing? And why don't I agree with him when he's the one that created me? Why? Like, why would I believe anything anybody else had to say? So a lot of people, they struggling with, well, this person said this, but God said this. They're like literally unstable in all their ways because they're double minded.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't know what to believe. And so even in my program, there's a part in my program, the M in my program stands for magnifying your relationship with God. Because at the end of the day, whatever you believe about yourself should only be based on God. That
That's
that that literally should nothing else should define that for you, because he's the one that created you. He's the one that knew you before you were born. He's the one that formed you in your mother's womb. He knew you before you were formed. So anything anybody else has to say was taken out of context. But by whatever may have happened at that before they even had their experience with you.
yeah.
So like there's people who've been like, "Oh, your heart's black, you're this, you're that," but that the thing that I did was in reaction to something else. You're saying my heart is black based on a situation, an interaction I had with you prior
Yeah.
to
Mm.
that I couldn't talk to you about because I was trying to protect your feelings. But that doesn't the things that you go through don't determine who you are. You were already determined before then. And I think a lot of people like, okay, they're trying to put it together in their minds what they're supposed to do instead of just talking to God about it. So don't we don't do the things that he tells us to do. So we don't know what we're supposed to be. And then we lose our purpose. Well, we never lose our purpose, but we don't know what our purpose is because we stop consulting him about everything. We stop seeking the kingdom of God first. We try to do everything else first and then seek him. And that does not it's backwards.
That's not what he's asking us to do. How so let me ask you, how does faith uniquely equip women to navigate and overcome challenges of trauma and identity loss?
It literally, like, I've seen a quote one time that said the Bible stood for the basic instructions before leaving Earth, and that literally is what it is. You even in my study time now, like, and I'll be completely honest with you. Last year, I lost a baby, and I was devastated. Like, I completely lost my faith last year. I would be completely because, like, I was just like, God, you took my baby, like, because I want a little girl so bad. I do. I want a little girl really, really bad. I have my son. I'm thankful for my son. He's my miracle baby. But I wanted a little girl really, really bad. And so when I felt like I was having a girl, it was like as soon as I felt that way, it was like when I went to the doctor for my first appointment, there was no heartbeat. But I was literally showing at 10 weeks, like I looked about 4 or 5 months pregnant at 10 weeks. And I was so devastated. And I was like, God, you don't love me. You said that I was healed, but apparently I'm not because this shouldn't have happened and blah blah like and I up until like we were talking earlier and I told you we had a hurricane here in Augusta. If this never happened, I would have been due that weekend.
That same weekend.
Hmm. I
Wow.
found out I was pregnant on January 24th. I was about 6 weeks pregnant. My due date when I went to the doctor before they found out the baby didn't have a heartbeat, they gave me my due date of September 26th. That was the day that the storm hit.
Oh my God.
And I said, God, I'm sorry. I literally had to step out of my own understanding. Like, so understand, like going through, even in my study time, now I'm like, God, wow, like, wow. I wish I had my notebooks in here. I have so many notebooks that I just write down things that he gives me. Like, there's certain places where it'll show you, like he'll just say things like how to handle conflicts with people. Like you go to someone and take someone with you as a witness, and even in your prayer time, he says he's not going to hear you if you don't go make it right. If you think somebody got a problem with you, go fix it. He wants your hands clean and your heart pure. Your heart ain't pure if you still holding on to unforgiveness. If you still got bitterness towards anybody, that's your heart's not pure.
That's true. That's true. You got to
And
let that
it's
go.
so angry with God, and I like, and if I could bring him in here, I
Yeah.
would tell my son's father to come because I there was days I just
You didn't have it.
mm, mm-mm.
Yeah.
And this was after I started this business.
Yeah.
Like I literally was in a coaching program, getting ready to launch my mentoring program, and it happened. And I was like, I ain't got it.
My God. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. I'm
I'm
so
okay.
sorry to hear that.
I'm okay now. Is it just like
No,
I,
that I say that because I want to say that I'm so grateful for you for just your honesty and your rawness, because you might even be talking to some women right now who are in the midst of it right now. And that loss is never easy. And for you to, find God through it all and see the bigger picture and then come back and share it, Briana, my hat goes off to you. I thank God for you for being able to be a witness, just to share that vulnerable space in your life. And look, I can still tell that He's preparing you for something. That's how God works. He's like, I'm gonna take you through it because I'm preparing you for something bigger.
you know what? I'll say this too. I realized that this was part of what he had for my life when I really started sitting down and thinking about the things that I went through and how I have cousins. Like, so my family, on my mom's side, it's all the girls. The girls are 10 to 13 years older than me. Like, the youngest of the older girls is 10 years older than me. Then it's all the boys, and then it's me. But when I was 22 and my cousin was 35, we were literally going through the exact same thing.
Hmm.
And so I'm like, well, why is it like she's 35 years old? Why am I going through the same thing she going through? And I'm 22. And it was because he literally was taking me through every situation I possibly could go through at that time, dealing with my identity. So
Got,
I was 17
got it.
when I got into an abusive relationship, and I didn't leave till I was almost 20.
Mm,
I've
mm,
been through in situations where I almost caught federal charges
mm.
for a man.
Jesus.
Like, yeah, being stupid in
Yeah.
college, but.
Yeah, girl, listen.
Listen, we
Okay,
listen, but we don't judge. Okay.
okay. You
Like,
are not
listen, I just making bad decisions in relationships and seeing how how that played out in my life. And now I'm like, okay. So like even when I had my son, it still was like, well, I had been through all of that and I still felt like I had my son late because I wanted to have kids very, very young. I wanted to be married at like 21. I want to be done having kids by the time I was 30. I didn't have my son until I was 29. And I'm like, you know what? I was late. Like, because I'm Southern. Everybody gets married young. You start having kids young. Some of them, they start having kids younger than that. I got, plenty of cousins, aunties, everybody that had kids in their teens. And I was like, oh no, I'm not doing that. But I wanted to have kids young and I wanted to have them close together in age. And I had this plan in my life and I was like, God, this don't look like that.
right.
Like,
Right. What we doing
what is
here?
this? What is the outcome of this? And here we are. This is it.
I was. Can I just say this? I look back at it now. I had my first time. I was just talking to my 12-year-old the other day, and I think I had him. I was 28 or 29, and then I had my kids back to back after that. And I'm thinking about the mom that I probably would have been back then. I don't think I was ready. I feel like I have a little bit more bearing underneath my feet right now than I did back then when I really wanted, when I tried so hard many years and failed at conceiving a child. So I look back at it now, I'm just like, okay, I'm a little bit more mature, if you will. I feel like God has brought me through some things, showed me some things, and now I feel like I could be a better person for them. I could be a better mom for them, even for my husband, because it gets hard out here. Um, so that's another factor to consider as well. Can I ask you something? What response would you tell someone who feels as if God abandoned them in the midst of their trauma? And how would you guide them back to faith?
He didn't. He didn't abandon you. That's yeah, it might feel like that. And a lot of that, like I said, with the miscarriage, that's literally what I felt like. I felt like he failed me. I felt like he abandoned me. I didn't want to hear nothing that nobody had to say about he didn't make no mistakes or, he know what he doing. I didn't want to hear none of that. I didn't. So I wouldn't tell anybody that. I genuinely would not, because that was what kept me from going to church when that happened. I was like, I don't want to hear nothing nobody got to say about God don't make no mistakes, because this feels like a mistake. Like, so I would tell people just to be bluntly honest with God.
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
think a lot of times we're taught that we're supposed to have this fear of him as if we can't talk to him. But at the same time, how are we supposed to cast our cares on him if we can't be honest with him? So I like my prayer journal, I'm very bluntly, I'm like, look, God,
I love it. I
look,
love
I love you, but look, this is where we at today. I don't have it today. Like I don't feel like it today. I don't. There's days where I just nope. I said, I'm
it.
probably gonna go get a drink after this. I've literally have told him everything
Mm.
because he already know it anyway. So what you gonna hide it from him for?
Anyway,
Like at that point, there's nothing like, if you can't be bluntly honest with him, can you really say that you're walking with him?
that's good.
If you're
That's
hiding your
good.
hand and doing things, even though he knows everything, he's the omniscient God. He knows everything. So what are you hiding it for? Like, I love like the even with certain people in my life, well, if I feel like I can just be myself, like my whole self, and not just the churchy me, not just the business me, not just the like if I can be
Me.
my entire
Yeah.
self, like
Yeah.
I know that I can trust them. So if I know that I'm supposed to trust God, then I should be able to do that with him. In my mind, in my thinking. That is just me.
Sure.
But I've always gotten the responses that I needed from him when I was completely honest with him.
That's true.
And he met
I,
me where I was. He can't meet you where you are. If you want to tell him where you are. Like
that's
it
true.
just I
That's
don't have any reason to fake it with him. So that's what I would tell somebody to do. Completely honest with him and allow him to speak afterwards, because a lot of us vent and walk off and don't let him say anything else. We don't want to hear nothing he got to say. We just like dump it on him and like, here, you deal with it, and don't listen for any response. And sometimes he wants to respond.
mm, I love that so much. Brianna, you have really helped and coached us through a lot of finding our identity through our trauma. And one of the biggest things that I heard you say from the moment we said hello and introduced you is your willing and your ability to just simply ask questions. And I love how you so eloquently put it when you talk to God and you just, say, God, here's what I think. I have questions about this. And I do believe that it's okay for us to say, you know what, God, I have questions about this. I don't understand that. Here, take this.
For me, we were told not to question God ever. And I was like,
Yeah.
why? Like, if I don't understand
Yeah.
something, I'm supposed to lean on my understanding. Why can't I ask?
Mm, come on. Come on. That's
My mom,
true.
if I wish, I wish my mom was here. She would tell you, like, as a little girl, I asked her, I said, Mama, are we supposed to pray for everything? And she's like, yeah. And I said, well, why we don't pray when we cross the street? And she
Mm,
was just like, I had to be like 5 at
mm.
the time. And she was like, um, I guess we're supposed to do that. And I was like, okay. And I said, Jesus name, amen. And I walked across the street. Like, he was like looking at me like, what made you ask me that? And I'm like, I don't know. That's just how my mind. I've always thought like that. Like,
I love
and it's
that.
crazy to think that I never thought I would get to this place with God because that's not how I grew up. I grew up that I was told, even as an adult, my dad told me that God don't talk to people.
Mm, mm,
So,
mm.
but that's what they believe, and I can't knock him, but that's what they teach, and in their organization. That ain't what I.
I love your approach, and I think you're setting a lot of people free, Brianna. You've been on your journey, and I know there are a lot of listeners who are just starting their journey or who don't know where to start. And you are just giving the basics of what we can do, just taking it to God, giving it to Him, let Him do a new thing in you. It may not look like what He did with your mom, it may not look what He did with your dad, but He let Him do that new thing in you. Okay, Brandon, before I let you out of here, I need you to talk to us about the Enamor Effect approach. You told us two,
Mhm.
one, two of the six. Are
I
you,
don't know.
okay? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I'm like,
So
are you up to
it's
just
an
tell?
acronym. So it
Okay.
spells out Enamor. E is for evaluating how you see yourself and
Mm-hmm.
others. N is for neutralizing the pain. A is adopting new beliefs and habits. M is for magnifying your relationship with God. O is for operating out of abundance. And R is reconciling behaviors.
I love it. I love it. Tell us how, if we need to book you, how can we find you? What is the first thing that we need to do to get into that seat?
So first things first, probably should be following me on Instagram at sincerely Brianna Nicole. Sincerely Brianna with one N.
Okay.
That's a whole nother story for another day. My mama. I gotta love my mama. But and then you can always go to my stand store, and that's stand.store/sincerely Brianna Nicole. You
Mm.
can book a one-on-one with me. I also have a free challenge coming up. I'm not sure when this is gonna air, but we do have the release, reset, and rise challenge that will be going on. I'm doing that once a quarter. And then also in the month of February, we are doing the love languages challenge. So I will be teaching you how to apply the love languages to your self love routine.
Oh, I love that.
And of course, I'll be launching my mentorship very, very soon. So just look out for that. Um, and I have a lot of freebies that people can download. So if they want to do that, just to kind of get into the mailing list, sure, have at it. Have at it because I got a lot of stuff coming. I have a lot of stuff coming.
I love it. I love it. So hold on. Did I hear you say that you did write the book, Brianna? Do you have a book out?
I'm actually in the middle of writing a devotional.
Okay. All
Um,
right. Got to get
and that came from my journey. As I mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
I went through PCOS, so my body went through a whole pregnancy basically. I
Wow.
had a positive pregnancy test. I looked pregnant for
Mm,
9 months, and then when I got to that date, my doctors was like, "Oh, it's not a baby, it's PCOS." Never heard of it in my life.
I haven't.
Polycystic ovarian syndrome. That very, very common apparently, because now I've seen people popping up everywhere with it. But
Mm,
as a matter of fact, Kiki Palmer had it. I don't know, but I was completely healed of it by the time I was 25. So I was diagnosed with it at 20. 3,
Mm.
which is why I had to leave FAMU because I was sick and I literally had like a mental break.
Mm.
Left Tallahassee and came back home to Augusta. Started going to my church home now,
Mm. Mm.
and
Thank you.
on Super Sunday they had on my 25th birthday. It was on a Sunday, and that was also the Sunday that we got our building that we're in now at 302 Barrel Drive in Augusta, Georgia. Shout out to Cathedral Place. I love my bishop and my elect lady, the Coppets. But God completely healed my body of PCOS with no medication. I didn't go back to the doctor. I was terrified to go back to the doctor to see what was going on. My elect lady told me, she was like, "I think you need to go back to the doctor." And I was like, "I don't want to. I'm not. I don't want to. Nope." Mm-mm. And she was like, "Brianna." I'm like, "Okay, fine. I'll go." So I went. They looked at it, and they never called me with my results. I had to go hunt them down in the hospital. At the time I was going to Eisenhower Medical, which is the hospital on base here. And of course, if y'all know about military doctors, y'all know. Um, but yeah, they was like, "There's nothing there." And I'm like, "What you mean there's nothing there?" And they was like, "Because before you couldn't even see my ovaries. It was so many cysts covered that you literally could not. They were unrecognizable to an OBGYN. People that look at ovaries all the time and they couldn't recognize them. No medication, no doctor intervention, medical intervention, nothing. It was just gone.
Wow. Just healed.
And so he sent me back to Tallahassee, when I started my first business, which is it's now called Johari Lux Virtual Services. But that's when I started that business. And while I was there, I got pregnant with my son. And I was like, when I took the test, I said, "There's no way. There's no way that I'm pregnant again." And well, for the first time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And he sent me back to the same medical center, to the same doctor. And they were like, "Didn't we see you?" I said, "Yeah, you did. And you told me I couldn't have kids, but somehow I'm here again." And I was like, "Go ahead and tell me that it's something going on. I know. I already know." Like, I was trying to, like, mentally prepared that I'm sick again. And they was like, "Oh, no, that's a heartbeat right there."
Oh,
like,
look at God.
Okay. And a miracle baby happened. He brought me back to Augusta because he decided to come 10 weeks early. That's another story for another day. You can follow me on YouTube too. Subscribe to my YouTube channel because it's on there. But
I love it.
He came 10 weeks early while I was here visiting for Christmas, and I had to move back. So going through that, then having a miscarriage right like 2 years after that, and having to go through all the things postpartum, like going through postpartum twice, one with my son and one with a miscarriage. They don't tell you that either. But yeah, it just kind of when I completely lost myself. And even if I have days where I don't feel like myself, I still have the solution.
I love that so much, Brianna. Okay, that's a testimony within itself. 2 testimonies, 3 testimonies. Girl, we can go on and on and on. But just for those who are listening, go ahead.
I said that's how we overcome. We just keep
Exactly.
And that's that's another thing people can do. If they feel like something happened, keep telling your story. You don't get your deliverance out of that. I promise.
And that's what God wants. I believe that when God does these miracles in our lives, He wants us to go back and be a witness and tell someone else. Okay, Brianna, I want to thank you so much for coming in and sharing your story, sharing your truth here with us at the Well. Ladies, if you were blessed by this episode today, we ask that you take it, you share with a friend, you like, you subscribe, follow Brianna on all social media. I will leave it in the description below. And if you have a story that you want to tell, send us an email at info@womanwitness.com. That's info@womanwitness.com. We want to hear it. Before I let Brianna go, Brianna, I want to give you back the floor. I want you to give us just a little something to take with us throughout the week.
I'm going to give you a quote from the new Mufasa movie because it just hit me in my chest. It says, "When the earth shakes, your destiny is near." So when things get a little shaky around you, you're close. You're close to whatever it is. If it's discovering yourself, if it's whatever you've been praying for, you're close.
That is so good. Come on. You are closer than you think. I love that so much. Oh man, I could take that and run with it. It's such
I almost took off in that movie theater.
Look, look, I
Listen.
love it so much. And check out that movie. That movie is good. Look, shout out to
Mhm.
Mufafa. There we go. Okay.
It's good.
All right. Thank you so much, Briana, for being a guest here on the One Witness podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I want to thank everyone who has supported One Witness podcast on the One Witness TV network throughout our first 3 seasons. We are now in season 4. I cannot believe what God has done. It's all about, I'm just a witness out here, just showing you guys. My guests are coming on here showing you guys that God can and he will do it. His promises never fail. If he said it, believe it, it's going to come true. You are like me and you have been, and maybe possibly like Briana as well, and you've been through a stage of identity. You don't know who you are. You don't know what your purpose is in life. You know what? Ask God, God, show me who I am. Search my heart, oh Lord, show me who I am. And I promise you, he will. He will. He will do it. Okay. And perhaps you were chosen for such a time as this to write, to tell your story, your truth. Until next time, bye.